mojitos.
Olé.
Yum.
Hi everyone, welcome once again to episode
8
of Pandemic Kitchen. Anyway, we've been working underneath the house all day. I mean, we've been digging out the basement all day. So we've had a wonderful time filled with boulders and dirt. And black widow spiders everywhere. So tonight we need a little bit of comfort. So we're going to have
steak and onions with bourbon sauce.
And potatoes à gratin.
Gratin. Or, if you want to call it, scallop potatoes.
Good old American.
Scallop potatoes.
From France. Anyway, we hope you enjoy the recipes, and we certainly will. Thanks for watching. Bonsoir. My name is Bruce Dobrin, and I am going to produce a fabulous American dish. One of the best. It is magnifique. I am going to produce the American dish potatoes à gratin. It is one of the finest of the American pantheon of wonderful dishes. The advantage of the American dish is that it can have just about anything in it, as opposed to the French version, which is vastly inferior and requires you to have things like difficult cheeses and specially cut potatoes and only a limited number of ingredients. But if you are going to be using the American dish, the fabulous potatoes à gratin can have many different things, including all the things you have left over in the refrigerator. So I am going to start by slicing up an onion rouge, I believe. I am going to take some of our fine garlic that we have used in some of the previous dishes and turn it into little garlic slices to put in it also. I am going to take some leftover pancetta from breakfast and I am going to add that also. And I am going to use Yukon Gold potatoes as opposed to the fine examples used in France to this day. For our 8x8 baking dish, I am going to use 4 large Yukon Gold potatoes. They are magnifique. They are magnificent. They are the finest thing we have ever had. To begin with, I am going to take our pan and I am going to place butter all over it in great amounts. The more butter, the easier it will be to remove. Fortunately, the potatoes have already been peeled. Karla does not like doing it. I do not like doing it. So we made the dog do it. You want to cut the potatoes very thinly into little rounds. Once the potatoes have been turned into a thinly sliced and beautiful arrangement, you may place them in one layer upon the bottom of the baking dish, such as this. It is much like you are dealing cards in Monaco. Once this is finished completely, you take a few slices of butter and you place them upon maybe 3. You do a layer. We have this lovely cheese, which is a fine cheese from America called Monterey Jacques, which is based on a Mexican cheese, which is one of the finest cheeses ever for doing this, and much better than the Gruyere that you would normally use in France. To the 1 cup of Monterey Jacques cheese, an equal amount of Parmesan cheese. And then gently blend the two cheeses together. We're going to add a thin layer on the first layer. Just enough to make it delicious and wonderful. To that we'll add a few of the onions, a little bit of the garlic, maybe a little more of the garlic, and some of the pancetta. Now on to the next layer. We have reached the third or fourth layer. We put the rest of the cheese upon it, making sure that he's covered well. Maybe a little more pancetta and one more layer of butter. That should be enough. A few more garlics. And since this is really an American dish, we're not going to do this Frenchified stuff. We're going to put on some good old American heavy cream and dump about a cup of it all over. Ain't nothing better than this. Let me tell you right now. Yeehaw! I don't know what those Frenchies think they're doing, but this is real deliciousness. Now that we've got it done, we're going to stick it in the oven for about an hour.
What temperature?
375 degrees. Top rack. Since the potatoes au gratin are going to take about an hour, we're going to prep the steaks and the onions beforehand. We take the steak out. We want it to get to about room temperature. First I'm going to put a little bit of salt on it, help draw some of the moisture out of it. These are just sirloin steaks. It doesn't need to be anything special. We've done it with just about everything, and since we're slicing them up later, it's not going to make much difference. They're going to be nice and delicious anyway. And just let it get to room temperature. While we're waiting for that, Karla will do the onions.
I can't believe that I'm getting stuck doing the onions again. I'm supposed to cut them in rings, but it's easier to cut them in half rings.
Okay, it's been a little over an hour. We gave it an extra 2 minutes just to make it nice and crispy on top. Let's take a look at what we got here.
Ooh, that looks yummy.
That looks spectacular. It is magnifique. I'm going to put it over here.
To let it.
It needs to cool for at least 20 minutes, and that'll give us just enough time for the steak with onions.
Now that the gratin is out, it needs to cool for about 20 minutes. So I'm going to start with the onions for our steak. Get this pan nice and hot. I'm adding about a quarter stick of butter, some olive oil. I'm going to let it get nice and hot and maybe a little smoky. It may look like I put a lot of butter into the pan, but it's actually going to burn off because we're going to be adding a lot of stuff into it. It looks like it's nice and smoky, so I'm adding the onions, and I'm going to cook them until they're translucent and a little brown. I'm adding a little salt to the onions to draw out a little bit of the moisture. Now that the onions are translucent and a little brown, I'm going to move them into this bowl. Putting them into the microwave on warm hold.
We have the onions in the microwave. We've got the au gratin cooling. Now it's time for the steaks. Yes! Pan needs to be nice and hot. And we'll put these on. Still plenty of butter in here. If there's not, you can always add a little bit more. A little crowded. These are pretty wide. Probably 4 or 5 minutes and they'll be done. Maybe I'll turn them after 3. Take a look at them, see how they're doing. Really depends on the steaks that you have. You just have to do this by feel. Now the steaks are pretty much rare. I'm going to take them off and put them on a plate at the moment. Now that I've taken them off, I'm going to add a little bit of butter back into the pan and a little bit of olive oil. I'm going to take the steaks over to the cutting board for future activities and take the onions back out. These look delicious. Throw them all around. Probably use a cheap bourbon. You don't want to use your McKellen's for this or anything. You probably want to put in about around a cup. Be careful, it may flame up.
Oh my!
Don't worry, it'll go out. It's a relatively cool flame. Don't singe yourself. You can turn it down a little bit at this point. Turn it to about half. And while it's reducing, cut up the steaks. Normally I'd use a thicker steak for this, but it's a pandemic. You take what you can get. And back over to the stove. Sauce is beginning to thicken nicely, and we add the steak back in. And stir it around. Just let it get warm. And we're ready to serve! For your consideration, a series of American classics. Steak with bourbon and onions, and potatoes au gratin. A fabulous combination for people who've had a hard day or people who've had a soft day. it's time to eat. Thank you and good night.